welcome back. So in this video, we're going to just handle the authorization part. So last time we did authentication, setting up sign up, login. Now we need to actually make that sign up and login mean something. So there's a couple libraries we're going to want. So let me go, oops, so that's the wrong thing I want to open. So we're going to head over to npm.js.com. This is just where you can see different libraries listed. But one of them I want is express session. Okay. And this is just going to be middleware to set up session. So let me just make sure this is the right one. Okay. Note. Not saving the cookie itself. This is the node, blah, 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 blah. Just make sure this is the right one. I'll know it when I see it. Yeah. This is what I'm looking for. Okay. And then we also are going to want connect Mongo. Okay. And that's going to be for us to connect Mongo to basically what's going to happen. The way session works, let's establish that first. So the purpose of this middleware is that it's going to set up what's called a session cookie. So every time a user accesses the website, if that browser tab, okay, so basically a separate browser tab would have a whole separate what's called a session ID. So what it does is that it creates a little cookie of information that says this browser session ID is this. And what we'll do is that we're going to be using Mongo. That's what this middleware is going to do. We're going to store a little some data in that for that user in Mongo, and say, hey, every time this browser session makes a request, here's the data that kind of persists for that browser session. This way we can save pieces of data like what's the username, are they logged in, and we'll save it in that session. Okay. So again, what creates a session is a session middleware, which creates a cookie on the user's computer. When our server receives and sees the cookie, it knows to fetch some data from Mongo that should always be available when that session communicates with us. If they were to open up a new browser window or a new tab, that'd be a new session, so a new session cookie would be created. But this is generally how we're going to track that the user is logged in, and then again, if they close their tab or they open up a new window, they'd have to log in again. So that's what these two are going to do for us. Okay, so we're going to install those, npm install express session and connect Mongo. Okay, so that's what those two are going to set up for us. So we want to set up this session middleware. Okay, and so first things first, I'm going to take a look over here and see how do we set that up. Okay, so we take a look at our code snippets. And what I really want to do is set up something more like so. Okay, and let's just walk through what this code means. And this would belong in your middleware. So this is going to be in your server.js. So I'd go back to my middleware, and let me just think here. Do I want to? It's fine if I put it below all this. Okay, and then I also need to import session. So I have to be const session equals require express session. Okay. So what this does, it creates a new session cookie. Now we're going to pass in a secret. That's what we had that secret in our .env a long time ago. So we're going to use that instead. Process.env.secret. Okay, I'm just going to make sure that there's that it's in my .env. Good. Now, and the secret is just something it uses to kind of encode the cookie to make sure other people can't access that information if they were to hack the server. Resave just means should it automatically resave the cookie on every request, even if there's no changes to the cookie. Save uninitialized, if we assign no data on their first request to the cookie, should we bother making it? We're going to make that true. Okay, I'm going to actually comment out cookie secure, because what that does, it makes the cookie what's called an HTTP only cookie or HTTPS only cookie, which means we would need to have HTTPS. Good to have turned on once you deploy and you have an HTTP, you have a HTTPS URL, you get with an SSL certificate and all that stuff. But in the meantime, we'll leave that commented out. Okay. Now the thing is that right now by default, it's going to store data in the server's memory, which is fine if you're using a virtual private server or something like that. But just know that if that server were to restart, all that's gone. Okay, so we're going to be wanting to use Heroku, and Heroku has ephemeral servers. What that means is that they don't really exist in a sense. You don't have a server that's dedicated to you. What happens is that they spin up all these little mini virtual servers in little containers on demand as needed. So in that case, they're shutting down and turning on all the time, which means the memory is being wiped out. So saving your session in memory, meaning in your RAM, doesn't seem like a good idea on Heroku. Generally what happens there is your app has to be stateless, meaning the app itself can't rely on like really saving any data, like writing files and storing stuff in memory, because it's not going to be reliable for that. So that's why we're going to need like the Mongo, because that's a store that's going to be separate from our app, where we can store data that exists even if the app is down or up or down or up. Okay, so that's why we're going to want to use Connect Mongo. That's just going to save all the data in there. So now to set that up, all we have to do is, okay, basically what's going to happen here is for the store, we're going to pass in this property. So if the store property is like, where do you want us to store the session data? Okay, and we'll just use this. Okay, so I will just add that as a property. We'll just say boop, store, and I have to actually bring in Mongo store. So const Mongo store equals require, and let me actually just make sure that's how they imported it. Yep, from Connect Mongo equals require Connect Mongo. There we go. And this is going to create the connection for storing the session data. All I really care about, I don't think I need this Mongo options piece, so I can comment that out. All I really need this is the point to my database URL. This is not my database URL. That's just the boilerplate from the documentation. But we know that we stored our database URL in process.env.database URL. So I'll pass that in there. Okay, cool. Now, assuming all went well, I should be able to start the server and not get an error. And that looks good. Okay, cool. And let me just make a quick request just to make sure that that is all up and running. Okay, let's go over here. And that looks good. Okay, good. So our session stuff is working all right. So what that's going to give us the ability to access is a property called rec.session now. So now this session property will exist in the request object, and we can use that to kind of like store and retrieve data between requests. So now when you log in, going back to our user controller, I don't want to just redirect you to to-dos. I want to set rec.session.login to true. You've logged in. Okay, I want to set rec.session.username to equal username, because I want your username saved so I can use it later on. Because not only do we want to make sure that you're logged in, but we also want to make it where any to-dos you add are your to-dos. So we're going to build that out. So this is just going to allow us to track that you're logged in. Okay, now we need to actually, again, that variable is just a variable. So it doesn't automatically block you if you're not logged in. We have to now, using that variable, create what's called middleware to check for that. Okay, so what I can do is in my controllers, I'm going to make a new file called middleware.js. And this is just where I'm going to write custom middleware that I'm going to use throughout my routes. Okay, and first thing we're going to do is create our auth middleware. So auth, this one equal rec res. Again, it's just an express style function. Rec res, and actually has to equal next to, because middleware is never the ending. Middleware never sends a response, so it has to knock you to the next thing in the chain. So again, every express middleware, every express route technically is receiving this next argument. We don't always use it because our routes are always the end. They're the ones sending the response, so there's no need for this next. But when you're writing middleware, you need the next, because you have to somehow tell Express to go on to the next thing in the chain. So in this case, rec res next, what I want to do is check if rec.session.login is true, and if it is just move on. Go on to the next thing. Go on to the route. If you're not logged in, then what I want to do is res.redirect you back to the login page. Okay, res.redirect you back to the login page, which should be actually /auth/login. And then that's all this middleware does. Okay, if you're logged in, it's just going to flash you forward. If not, it's going to redirect you back. And then I'm going to export this middleware, module.exports equals, and then I'll just put an object. So that way, if I need to make more middleware later on, I have the ability to do so. But for now, we'll just say auth. Good. Okay, so I'm exporting an object, and that has that auth middleware in it. So now I can go back to my to-do router, and what I can do is I can import that middleware. So I can say const auth equals require. And actually, what I want to do is I want to wrap that in curly brackets, because again, I exported an object from that middleware file, so I want to destructure that object on the way out, and say ./middleware. Get that middleware file that's in the same folder. Okay, and there's two ways I could do this. I could register it as like just global middleware for this particular router and just be like router.use auth. That would work, and that's probably what I'm going to do for now. But I could also just actually inject it here. I could actually do it per route and say, first do the auth function and then do like this function. So it'll do this function first as like middleware for that specific route, and then run this. So I can actually like inject as many things as I want, long as they're following that sort of express style function signature. So that's all fun and good. I'm not going to do that because all the routes in this particular router need this middleware. So it's kind of redundant for me just to go auth. So what I'll do is, again, I'm just going to register that middleware. So register router wide middleware. So I'm going to say for any routes in this router, before you hit those routes, router.use, use the auth middleware. And that's going to check if the user's logged in. Okay. Now on top of that, I'm going to need a logout route. Okay, we want to log out. So let me head back to user. And we're going to create one more route, a logout route. This one's going to be pretty straightforward. And it's just going to be router.get /logout. And the function, we'll just do res. And all this is going to do is one rec.session.destroy. Pretty sure it's destroy. We'll double check in a second. But let me go over here. Head back to the rec session, expression session documentation, and I think Control F, destroy. Yeah, there we go. This session will be destroyed, deleted with the response ends. No, let's see here. Here we go, session.destroy. And then that will take a function. Okay, got it. Cool. So technically this function will take then a callback, so that way when it's done destroying the session, we can say do something, and we just want to redirect you back to the main page when you log out. Okay, so that's it. That'll log you out. It'll destroy the session, send you back to the main page, and that's good. So we need to just put a logout link. So let me go head back to our layout, and I want that only if you're logged in. So I'm going to put that among the logged in links. So after new to do, what I'm going to want is log out, and that's just going to be /auth/logout. Okay. And then technically now, if I refresh the page, so yeah, it redirected me back to the login page because I'm not logged in currently, because I haven't created that session. Now if I go to cheese, I do cheese, that's my user. I hit login. Okay, I go in there and then I see all this, and I can see there's a logout button. Nice. And if I click logout, it takes me back. Oh, cannot read properties of undefined. Reading destroy. Let's investigate. find reading destroy. So let me see here if I put a typo in that. User I put res.session.destroy, rec.session.destroy. There we go. That should do it. Okay, so let's go back, log out, and good. Now I'm back in the main page. Now the only downside right now, so now I have the ability to log in, and again, it's protected. Like if I try to go to the to-dos page without logging in, see, it redirects me back to the login page because of that middleware. That middleware is checking before any of those to-do routes get hit, whether I'm logged in, whether that session has been created. So I hit cheese, and I'm logged in. The problem is I'm still seeing the same old to-dos. Technically, if this was like my own stuff, it should be blank because I haven't created anything particularly my own. So what I need to do is just do a couple quick modifications. I want to change the index route so that way it only grabs all the to-dos whose username matches rec.session.username. Okay. And then I want to change the post route to make sure that the username is included in the rec.body. So before we do the to-do.create, I have to do like rec.body.username equals rec.session.username. And so that way it creates the whole to-do with the username tag, with the username, which actually I don't think we've changed that yet. So let's go back to our schema. Models, to-do. What I want to do is I want to add a property to to-dos to track the username. So that's going to be a string. So this way we know which user it belongs to, and that's how we're going to know, like, hey, is it this user's, is it that user's? And then we can just query, say, hey, give me all the to-dos from this user. Give me all the to-dos from that user when they log in. So that's saved. Okay. So now, technically it should work. Technically with those changes, it should work. So again, just to kind of recap those changes, we had to add the username property to the to-do schema. And then in the to-do controller, we updated the index route so that way it queries based on the username, pulling the username from rec.session, because we stored it in there on login. And then when we create a user, we're just making sure we add the username property to it. Okay, and then we're good to go. So let's try this out. Okay, so now if I refresh this page, I get no to-dos because those to-dos didn't belong to my username. But now if I create like a new to-do, boop, 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 I have the to-do. Now if I log out and go under a different user, so I go under Bob with the password Bob. Okay, and then I log in as Bob. Okay, see, Bob doesn't have any to-dos yet either. So now I can do a new to-do, and Bob can have its own to-dos. And now each user has their own to-dos. And they can't see it unless they're logged in under the right account. And that's all pretty good. So this app is pretty nice and set up. Now we'll do one more video with just sort of like miscellaneous things to just kind of improve the user experience. But I'll see you guys in that video.